Good morning. Woo! Wake you up. I have a sparse after Thanksgiving congregation, I see. But good morning, everybody, and welcome to Heritage Universalist Unitarian Church. My name's Bob Drake. I'm the worship associate today. If you're new, especially, here at Heritage, we nurture and support each other in this community that we call Heritage. Support in times of need, encouragement for each individual's search for truth and meaning. And we try to spread the love and connections we have in this small space that is our congregation out into the greater world. We try to engage in service to others and to advocate for peace, justice, and equity, both right here in the sanctuary and in the community at large. We care about each other, and yet in other ways we don't care. In other words, we don't care about anyone's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, immigration status, or the manner in which they choose to exercise their own spiritual expressions. All folks of goodwill are welcome here. If you're new to Heritage, there's a guest book in the lobby for you to sign if you desire, or if you're attending remotely, hi Zoomers, you can sign up at our website, huc.net, where you can let us know who you are and request any additional information. Or if you'd like to be contacted, that's fine. If you don't want to, if you prefer to just check things out for a while, you're welcome no matter what. We have a board greeter, Gary Wilson, who's available to give a short building tour or answer any questions. We have a guest minister today, the Reverend Diebel. Alice is familiar to many here at Heritage. She's served as our guest minister before. Alice's ministry is twofold. She's passionate about criminal justice reform, working with the goal of reforming our systems of mass incarceration. That's her justice work. And also reaching out with compassion to people who've been affected by incarceration, more her pastoral work. She has a much wider involvement in various social justice issues, including women's rights, anti-racism initiatives, early childhood development, and immigration equity. She also serves as a contract minister for the UU congregation of Petoskey, Michigan, online. It's a long commute. Originally from Michigan, sorry about you Ohio State fans, Alice lives in Dayton now with her partner, Bob. And now Alice will lead us into the spiritual space that is our service.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning to all who are here despite turkey overload. Our call to worship comes from the Reverend Elizabeth Mount. From our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet by turning to one another. Generation to generation, we awaken to the dawn and fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without the air, and we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer our love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. Thank you, Liberty. She lit our chalice this morning. As we light the chalice, may our souls become its hearth. We join our hearts to the one great flame of bright compassion, beloved community, and fervent justice. May we become lanterns to the world, lighting the way for all. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 20, Be Thou My Vision, and remain standing for the covenant after the hymn.
And now let's reaffirm the agreement that we have with each other as to how we treat each other and how we interact with the outside world. We affirm love as the spirit of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Oh, one last note. I neglected, you go ahead and sit down. I neglected one announcement that next weekend we have our 10,000 Villages Holiday Sale and Bazaar. Saturday and Sunday, that's December 2nd and 3rd. Saturday is 10 to 3 and Sunday is noon to 3. So 10,000 villages will be set up in the Great Hall. There'll be music, hot chocolate, apple cider, all kinds of goodies. Great Hall, and they will be, 10,000 villages will be setting up in the Great Hall and offering their global fair trade goods, and 15% of the proceeds go to heritage. So you're not only supporting people in various countries around the world who are being paid a fair price for the goods that they make, you're also benefiting heritage.
Apropos for our service today, 10,000 Villages is a good organization. So we have a story for everyone this morning. It's called Desmond Gets Free. And this book was written by a Unitarian Universalist, Matt Meyer, and illustrated by Kim Pham. And the lead-in says, for all those working to build a new world of justice, equity, and compassion. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in the land. Every morning, Desmond woke with the sunrise and would spend the day playing in the meadow. And every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke and it was still dark out. He tried to roll over to a more comfortable spot, but something wasn't right. Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground, and it was beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow, just on his tail. Desmond pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail. He pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail. And he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. But it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. Good news, he thought. "Oh, giraffe," Desmond cried, "could you please push the boulder a few inches in the other direction so that I could go free?" The giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed, the way giraffes do. "Silly mouse," said the giraffe, "there's no boulder. That's an elephant that's fallen asleep in the middle of the meadow, just on your tail." "Well, if you could just wake the elephant up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." "Well," replied the giraffe, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these." Well, Desmond quietly replied, "Well, I do not appreciate your neutrality." Neutrality, mean taking sides, right? The giraffe wandered off, and Desmond tried to call out to the elephant and wake him up. But those giant ears were just too far away on the other side of the giant elephant body. So again, Desmond pushed on the elephant and tugged on his tail. He pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up again, a gazelle wandered by. "Oh, gazelle," he cried, "oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep on my tail in the middle of this meadow, and I'm stuck, and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I might go free." "Well," said the gazelle, "I see your problem there, but you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it best to remain neutral in times like these." Desmond replied almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried again to push the giant animal away. He tried again to tug his little tail, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up for the last time, he saw another mouse wandering through the meadow. "My name is Nelson." Maybe you grown-ups can figure out who these people are, who these mice are. "Nelson, the giant elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you might run over and call into his giant ears and ask him just to roll over a few inches in the other direction so I could go free," Desmond asked. "Of course," said Nelson. Nelson ran all the way to the other side of the elephant, all the way to the other side of that elephant body, and he called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of the giant elephant head. But the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but he felt too comfortable to move. Nelson ran back to Desmond, a little out of breath, and said, "I have an idea. Don't move." He ran off. "I won't," muttered Desmond. A little while later, though, Nelson emerged through the tall grass, and he wasn't alone. Nelson had found 3 other mouse friends to help him, and each one of them had also brought 3 other friends. The whole group of them ran over to the giant head of that giant elephant. One mouse scrambled up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse scrambled up on her shoulders. And then one after another, they climbed up until the whole group of them had formed a long mouse ladder right up the side of the elephant. At last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of his mouse friends, one on top of the other, until he was way up on the giant head, standing next to the giant elephant ear. "Excuse me," he called out right into that ear. "It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. I wonder if you could just roll over a few inches in the other direction so he might go free." The giant elephant made a giant low groan. "Grrrp. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." So Nelson asked more of his mouse friends to climb up. One by one, they helped each other up the side of the elephant. One by one, they called out into the giant elephant ear on top of the giant elephant head. Again, the giant elephant made a giant low groan. "Grrrp. I'm comfortable where I am, just go away." Then Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and then all at once they yelled out together, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over a few inches in the other direction so he can go free." This time, all those voices together right next to the elephant's ear were too loud to ignore. "I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket," said the elephant. And then the elephant rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and the other mice helped each other climb back down, and Desmond was finally free. Desmond and Nelson and all their mouse friends spent the rest of the beautiful day playing in the middle of that beautiful meadow. And that's our story. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality." Our reading this morning is from the Earth Charter from the year 2000. We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Toward this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of Earth, declare our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. Please join me for a moment of silence. We give thanks for those moments when we can feel that we live in a world that is not indifferent to our need. We all have so many needs, 1,000 prayers, 1,000 needs, 1,000 villages, that really only need one answer: let the world not be indifferent. And may we live and be with each other in the way that shows this truth, whatever the day brings, that neither are we indifferent to each other. Amen.
I'm not Erin Walzewski, that should be apparent, but I'll try to channel her. As many of you know, each week our offering goes not to support our church, but to support a nonprofit organization whose mission connects with our message or a timely event. Before I tell you about this week's recipient, I want to preview for you that next week will be a special offering for our now annual donation to Interparish Ministry to IPM's Holiday Store. This was a very, very popular program last year that enabled our young people to buy gifts for less fortunate families in our community, and you'll hear all about that next week. How many of you have ever sent a care package to someone, a friend or a family member, even a stranger stationed abroad, or a child away at college or living away needing a taste of home? Our Sharing Our Abundance recipient today, care.org, started that way back at the end of World War II when 2.8 million Army surplus 10-in-1, meaning 10 meals for one person or 10 meals for one day or one meal for 10 days, 10-in-1. Anyway, their military food rations were acquired by a group of American charities to aid war-torn European countries. These were the first care packages. In fact, the original name of the organization was, it's kind of a clumsy acronym name, but Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe, CARE. Many countries were devastated by the effects of the war, and CARE sent direct aid to a dozen different countries to give people the food and supplies they needed. When the Soviets lifted their blockade of Berlin in 1949, the first vehicles inside the city were CARE delivery trucks bringing care packages, met by roaring crowds of Berliners. After 10 years, CARE had a big celebration for hitting the milestone of delivering their 50,000th care package. CARE eventually shifted its services to expand around the world to places of the greatest need, changing the E in the name from Europe to everywhere. They were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1951. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy selected CARE to train the personnel of a brand new program called the Peace Corps. In 1984, President George H.W. Bush called CARE, quote, the conscience of our country. By the 90s and early 2000s, CARE had created some of the most impactful relief programs in the world. The largest food program in the world in Egypt, one of the largest efforts for girls' education in both India and Cambodia, and comprehensive food, agriculture, and development programs in over 40 countries, South America, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. You remember I said CARE celebrated its 50,000th package delivery in 1955? They also celebrated the milestone of the 50 millionth package delivered. And here's the best part. That milestone was hit in 1963. They eventually stopped counting packages delivered, both because the number got so high and because in recent decades they've shifted to focus on comprehensive infrastructure and relief programs. Today, 75 years after its founding, CARE is one of the largest and most effective poverty relief organizations in existence. So please join us today in supporting CARE, once named the best managed charity in the world, as we support their work alleviating poverty around the world. For those on Zoom, the link to donate is in the chat, and for those here in person, we gratefully receive your gifts to CARE.
We live on an absolutely astounding planet filled with abundance and diversity. You have a beautiful wooded park right next door, right outside the door. This time of year, the leaves are falling, mostly fallen. The colors might be gone, but the fragrance and the crunch of the brown leaves underfoot, just very refreshing, aren't they? Maybe there'll be wet leaves later. But that crunch and the changing of the seasons reminds me that this can be a time for dormancy, for rest, not worry. So let us turn this time of rest to a time for reflection, a reflection on gratitude and generosity and how the world might turn in new ways, ways that can turn our hearts from an attitude of gratitude toward a behavior that leads us toward kinship, justice, and sustainability. The author Anne Lamott writes, "Gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. We mysteriously find ourselves willing to pick up litter in the street or let others go first in traffic. You breathe in gratitude, and you breathe it out too. Thanks leads to a crazy thought. What more can I give? We take the action first by giving, and then the insight follows, and this fills us. Now, sin is not that adult bookstore on the corner. It is instead that hard heart, the lack of generosity, and all the isms, racism and sexism and so forth. But there is a crack where a ribbon of light might get in. It might sneak past all the roadblocks, piles of stones, mental and emotional and cultural. Your casual generosity will touch, lift, and encourage someone else. In other words, you have changed something for the better by your generosity, and someone else will follow you, and this will be quantum. The movement of grace toward gratitude brings us from the package of self-obsessed madness to a spiritual awakening. Gratitude is peace, she concludes. It's all too easy for those of us in the U.S. to ignore suffering elsewhere in the world. So let us turn our sense of gratitude toward people who are suffering in other parts of the world and recognize them as kin. If you came in early, we had a prelude. It was something maybe triggered in the back of your memory banks called We Are the World. It's drawn on music from 1985, and it was a benefit for Africa. It had all the artists in it. It was written by Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson. And if you go home and watch the video, I recommend it. You'll see all kinds of faces that you recognize, much younger than they are now, and many others died too soon. But it was a heralded thing because the artists were encouraged to check their egos at the door. This wasn't about them. This was about something bigger. These benefit concerts started maybe around 1971 with George Harrison and Ravi Shankar doing the concert for Bangladesh. They've become a way to bring attention to global issues and raise money. It's one way. They may do little to make systemic change, however. That begins with us. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. The global community faces the proverbial fork in the road, where one path takes us to what David Corton of Yes Magazine describes as the great unraveling, and the other fork takes us toward the great turning. This is an older concept from a book in 2006. The unraveling is seen in climate change and economic instability, war and conflict, and rising authoritarianism. Seems like we're going down that unraveling path, doesn't it? The great turning is moving away from empire toward earth community. I had the great fortune of meeting a community organizer named Michael Ray Matthews, and he said something that has never left me. He said, "Do you want to be a chaplain for the empire or a prophet for the resistance?" Well, giving comfort and succor to the empire was certainly not where I wanted to put my energy, for sure. That said, I do sometimes serve the empire more than the resistance. I mean, let's face it, I live a life of privilege. I was born in the USA. I'm white, middle class, I have an education, I'm temporarily able-bodied, I have a decent income and a savings in the bank. I do my best to protect what I have. Who wouldn't? The problem is most of the world does not live like me, and my social location can cut me off from the rest of the world if I'm not careful, if I don't pay attention to the world around me and beyond me. Before I was a minister years ago, I was a visiting nurse in the city of Detroit. And in that role, I saw a lot of poverty. I also saw people lovingly cared for by their family members in their homes. That was my job, to go to the homes of people. Sometimes people would give up their jobs to take care of their loved ones. The income disparities from home to home were palpable. Some homes immaculate. Others, you couldn't safely navigate the stairs, sometimes on the same block. The disparities were right in front of me then. And there was a narrative out there, and maybe you've heard this narrative, and maybe you've even repeated it, right? The narrative is that these people are to blame for the circumstances they are in. Oh, if they would just work harder, go to school, not have children, couldn't they pull themselves up by their bootstraps? I disagreed with that thought back then. I felt as though people who lived in poverty were not to blame for the circumstances they lived in any more than I could take credit for the family I was born into. But I had no idea what to do about it. Somewhere in the back of my mind, though, I did wonder maybe if they would work hard, they could move up. I'm not proud of those thoughts. Most of my clients in Detroit did have homes at least, but on the streets, I saw people without homes and really wished someone would do something, move that elephant an inch. Homelessness seemed to me to be the ultimate sin of our government. How could we allow this? But I eventually moved up the ladder into healthcare administration and turned my thoughts away from what I witnessed. But it kind of gnawed at me, right? In the back of my mind, it was there. I had also seen poverty in other countries that was heart-wrenching. In Mexico, right along the border to the US, now this is before we built this wall, right? There were people living in the arroyos, those dry, dangerous dry stream beds, in cardboard boxes. This was literally a stone's throw away from the richest country in the world. This kind of poverty is much more about systems than individuals. In our capitalist system, we have some government programs that help, but they're really not designed to change things. Food stamps, for example, they're not going to change these income disparities. They do help alleviate hunger. Let's not get rid of them. But for those of us with privilege, these systems are invisible. It's just the way it is. David Corton, in his book, The Great Turning, tells the Star Trek story of the cloud minders. I don't know if there's any Trekkies out here. The story takes place on the planet Ardana. The planet's rulers live in peaceful splendor in the beautiful city of Stratos, suspended on a platform high in space, far removed from the planet's desolate surface. They are also far removed from the misery that's endured by the troglodytes who toil under horrible conditions in the planet's mines below to earn the interplanetary exchange credits, money, used to import the luxuries that the Stratos rulers enjoy. The rulers consider their privilege to be wholly fitting, given their perception that it is their superior intelligence, cultural refinement, and moral sensibilities that set them apart from the troglodytes below. Is that story so far off from the bootstrap story? Corton writes that this transparent political allegory speaks to the stark division between the elite rulers of planet Earth, who live in gated mansions, work in tall office towers, and fly in a private jet to meetings, have luxury vacation homes, and those whose toil makes their luxuries possible, the workers. To legitimate the empire, the stratos dwellers of our planet Earth construct stories that praise their personal virtues and glorify the greatness of their pride. Beyond accountability to ordinary mortals. It is virtually impossible for rulers to rule wisely when they are so far removed from the reality of the lives of those who shoulder the burdens of their decisions. Now, I don't know anything about interplanetary poverty, but I can certainly learn about global poverty, and it's on a scale that we can't really imagine. Most of us don't know the conditions of the people living in the global south. Maybe some of you have traveled. But according to a UNICEF World Bank analysis from September of this year, there are about 333 million children in the world, 1 in 6, that live in extreme poverty. That's the size of this country. At the end of last year, 685 million people were living on less than $2.15 a day. The World Bank blames things like limited social protections, rapid population growth, the pandemic, conflict, and climate change. They specifically cite the war in Ukraine for rising food and energy prices. But there may be other things that are responsible as well. David Korten argues that human consumption is very much to blame, and that consumption is usually on the part of richer countries like ours. Korten says that humans are consuming food and materials by depleting non-renewable resources like minerals and fossil fuels, and renewable resources like forests, fisheries, soil, and water at unsustainable rates. I noticed in the bathroom you have a sticker on your paper towels that says, "These come from trees." I thought, what a great reminder. These come from trees. Those of us in the richest countries, the empire, continue to gain more from ourselves from other countries at the expense of the vulnerable. And it happens within the US too. Korten says empire dominates at all levels, from relations among nations to relations among family members. Empire brings fortune to the few, condemns the majority to servitude, suppresses the creative potential of all, and appropriates much of the wealth of human societies to maintain the institutions of domination. Harsh words. It does indeed sound like the planet Ardana. In The Great Turning, David Korten puts forward a vision for us that we are not helpless in the face of power of empire. He says, to turn our world from empire to earth community, we need to unleash the human potential for creative cooperation, share resources and surpluses for the good of all, and we must make a choice to relearn how to live by the earth community principles. The Great Turning needs to occur in 3 major areas: economic, political, and cultural. Economic turning requires that we redefine wealth from gross domestic product, or how much money we have, to instead consider the health of our families and communities and environments. That becomes our capital. The health of all of us. We could shift from the rights of ownership to the rights of stewardship. We are seeing this idea played out in social enterprises or organizations that are concerned with more than profit. They may be for-profit organizations, but they have broader concerns than shareholder returns. UU author Sharon Welch writes about certified benefit corps, or B corporations, which are businesses that measure their impact on society and the environment, not just the bottom line. These B Corps have a declaration of interdependence. I like that, a declaration of interdependence. They envision a global economy that uses business as a force for good. They believe they must be the change they seek in the world, that all business ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered, that their products, practices, and profits should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. Most of all, they will act with the understanding that they are each dependent upon one another and responsible for each other and future generations. Wow. Imagine a business with that philosophy. There's a list of them out there. You can find in Ben & Jerry's as one. The political turning, the second one, the political turning Corton describes, moves us from a $1, one-vote democracy to a one-person, one-vote democracy, and from passive to active citizenship. It means that rather than compete for individual advantage, we move to cooperate for mutual advantage. We are currently in the midst of a significant struggle for political turning as authoritarianism is on the rise in this country and around the world. It can be countered with active citizenship. Active citizenship means working toward increasing access to voting rather than restricting voting access. It is in registering voters and getting out the vote. It is encouraging representatives to put forward a platform that helps redistribute the wealth and holds them accountable to do so. It is Desmond calling on the other mice to get him free. And finally, the third step is the cultural turning, and that includes a spiritual awakening, turning away from money towards spiritual fulfillment, from a belief in our limitations to a belief in our possibilities, and from fearing our differences to rejoicing in our diversity. I see signs outside here about diversity, right? Something we care about. Culture is formed by the stories we tell, and the stories of empire are told over and over and over. The story is that constant economic growth helps everyone, and that the wealthy can create a better life if we cut their taxes and eliminate their regulations, measures that reduce how much they can trickle down to the rest. Or there's a security story about how dangerous the world is with terrorists and enemies, and we're certainly seeing that play out. And of course, there is Christian nationalism, reinforcing the story that God rewards the wealthy and powerful and mandates them to rule the poor. They deserve what they get, all driven by greed. Cultural shift, a spiritual awakening. A cultural shift can be seen in how the UU Service Committee, or the UUSC, operates. Earlier this year, Heritage joined with the other UUs in Cincinnati, cooperated to bring UUSC to town. I don't know if some of you were there. UUSC is a unique mission-oriented organization. They don't send in missionaries to convert people. Instead, they offer support to groups in countries that already have something going on. UUSC specifically looks for places where women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights are under threat, or where democracy is in peril. The UUSC supports self-determination and advances human rights. They partner with people who are confronting power structures and injustice. They side with the troglodytes. They are grounded in the belief that all people have inherent power and dignity. Many UUs make donations to the UUSC at this time of year through the Guest at Your Table program. I encourage you to take a look at that. And the CARE organization that you're committing to today is another great way to support redistribution of wealth. But let's go back to the beginning of the sermon, and I'd like us to turn toward a spiritual practice of gratitude. Joanna Macy, a Buddhist who actually coined the term the Great Turning, writes, "When we come from gratitude, we become more present to the wonder of being alive in this amazing world. to the many gifts we receive, to the beauty and mystery it offers. Yet the very act of looking at what we love and value in our world brings with it an awareness of the vast violation underway, the plunder and unraveling. Coming from gratitude grounds us in trust and psychological buoyancy, which supports us in facing harsh realities. From gratitude, we naturally flow to honoring our pain for the world. Gratitude is a cultural turn that kindles resilience. If we are willing to listen to the heart that is filled with gratitude, then perhaps we can find the will and the way to help the wheel turn politically, economically, and culturally. Joanna Macy says we must slow down the destruction of industrial growth, protect endangered species, provide soup kitchens for the homeless, civil disobedience against the munitions makers, polluters, and others. Let us create new forms and structures of society. It is visible. You can see it all around us: solar panels and wind farms, farmers markets and land trusts, co-housing and co-ops. These structures must be sustained by change in our perception of reality. We need a personal and collective, cognitive and spiritual shift, inspired by ancient traditions and by new sciences. So may we have gratitude for ancestors and for solar panels. This turn lets go of the isolated self and instead embraces us all as kin, our mutual belonging in the web of life. Macy writes, now in these very times, these three rivers, our anguish for the world, scientific breakthroughs, and ancestral teachings flow together. From the confluence of these rivers, we drink and awaken to what we once knew. We are alive on a living earth, source of all we are and know. Despite centuries of mechanistic conditioning, we want to name once again this world as holy. You heard it over and over today that we must work together to turn the wheel. We must recognize that the way things are not the way we want things to be. We must not turn away from suffering. We must use our creative potential to imagine something better. We must use gratitude, knowing it will move us to action. And we must tell that story. May it be so. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 128, For All That Is Our Life.
Well, remembering we just had Thanksgiving with our daughter, son-in-law, and 3 grandchildren. As we sat around the table eating and talking, we got to hear what's going on in everybody's lives, you know, the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, joys and sorrows. Of course, with our little group, it was mostly good stuff because it was Thanksgiving, you know. And here at Heritage, Candles as Community is a lot like that. It's a lot like sitting around the family table. We get a chance to let everyone know what's happening in our lives, and we light candles to focus our intentions and share the joys and sorrows expressed in solidarity with those making the requests. There were no candle requests put in via email, so I invite anyone that has joy or sorrow to share, please line up on either side of the sanctuary, take the microphone, and tell us what's on your mind, and we'll light a candle. And now we'll light one last candle for any joys or sorrows that have remained unexpressed.
Will you join me in prayer, please? Living Spirit that moves among us and within us, we are grateful for our time together today. In this supportive community, we hold in our hearts all those affected by surgeries, deaths, illness. And we're buoyed by the joys of others with anniversaries, reunions, large gatherings, and games won. During our lives, we do not turn away from the larger problems in the world. May we do what we can to change our stories as we live our lives. Amen, and blessed be. I encourage you to watch this song, What a Wonderful World, which is an old song, but it's done on a global scale.
Blessed day, then the dark, secret night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you.
And I don't know if Liberty's still out there. Do you want to put out the chalice for us? All right. You don't have to run. People are late for coffee, though, I think. Our flame of compassion does not go out, even though we extinguish this chalice. May we carry our lanterns out into the world, lighting the way for all, so that we may build a just and beloved world for all.
Now for our traditional benediction, let's gather in whatever size circle fits the number of people we have here. May the Spirit of life. That each of us possesses. Flow from one to the other.